The message came on a cold morning in December. It arrived through radio waves that no one on Earth had ever heard before. Scientists at the Global Space Agency picked it up first. They thought it was a mistake. They checked their equipment 3 times. But the message was real. For the first time in human history, someone from beyond the stars was talking to Earth. Catherine Moore was drinking her coffee when her phone rang. She was the United States ambassador to the United Nations. A woman who had spent 30 years solving impossible problems. But nothing in her life had prepared her for the words she heard that morning. Ambassador Moore, we need you at headquarters. Right now, this is not a drill. 2 hours later, she stood in a room filled with the most powerful leaders on the planet. On a screen before them played a message that would change everything. The voice was strange. It did not sound human. But the words were clear. To the inhabitants of the 3rd planet orbiting the star you call Sol, you have been observed. You have been measured. The Galactic Council of Spacefaring Civilizations extends an invitation. Send representatives to our station above the world you call Kepler 442b. You will be given one chance to prove your species is worthy of joining galactic society. You have one of your years to arrive. The journey will test you. The judgment will be final. The message ended. The room was silent. Catherine looked around at the faces of presidents and prime ministers, generals and scientists. She saw fear in their eyes. But she also saw something else. Hope. Well, she said quietly, I suppose we should start packing. The next 12 months were the busiest in human history. Every nation on Earth worked together for the first time. Old enemies became partners. Resources were shared. Scientists who had spent their careers competing now collaborated. The ship they built was called the Horizon. It was not beautiful. It was not elegant. But it was strong. And it would carry humanity's hopes across the stars. Captain Daniel Hayes was chosen to lead the mission. He was 52 years old, a former Navy pilot who had become an astronaut. He had gray hair, calm eyes, and a reputation for staying cool when everything was falling apart. People trusted him. That was why they picked him. His crew was small but carefully selected. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Vance was a linguist, a woman who had spent years studying the fragments of alien signals that Earth had collected. She was brilliant, serious, and rarely smiled. Dr. Samuel Green was the ship's science officer, a xenobiologist who had dedicated his life to imagining what alien life might look like. Now, he would finally find out if he was right. Ambassador Moore insisted on coming herself. She was the best negotiator Earth had, and she was not going to trust humanity's future to anyone else. On the day of launch, 1 billion people watched. The Horizon rose from the ground on pillars of fire, climbing higher and higher until it disappeared into the blue sky. Children pointed and cheered. Adults wiped tears from their eyes. Everyone understood that something important was happening. The journey to Kepler 442b took 11 months. The ship used a new kind of engine, something called a fold drive. Scientists had built it using technology they found in strange debris on Mars, debris that was clearly not from Earth. The engine worked by folding space, by making 2 distant points suddenly close together. Each fold was terrifying. The ship would shake and groan, and reality itself seemed to twist and bend. Then, suddenly, they would be somewhere new, millions of miles from where they had started. During those long months, the crew trained and prepared. Ambassador Moore practiced her speech 1,000 times. Captain Hayes ran drill after drill, making sure everyone knew their jobs. Dr. Green studied everything humanity knew about alien life, which was not very much. Patricia Vance worked on translation protocols, trying to prepare for languages no human had ever heard, but mostly, they waited. Space was big, and empty, and quiet. There was too much time to think, too much time to worry. What if they don't like us? Patricia asked one night. She and Captain Hayes were sitting in the observation room, watching the stars slide past. Then we'll make them like us, Hayes said. And if we can't? Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then we'll go home and try again. That's what humans do. We don't give up, Patricia smiled. It was one of the rare times he saw her smile. On the final day of the journey, the horizon made its last fold. When reality stopped twisting and the stars became steady again, everyone on the ship gathered at the windows. What they saw took their breath away. The station hung in space like a small moon. It was enormous, bigger than anything humans had ever built. Lights covered its surface, millions of them, blinking and glowing in patterns that seemed almost alive. Ships flew around it, hundreds of them, ships of every shape and size. Some were sleek and beautiful. Others were strange and frightening. A few did not look like ships at all, but like living creatures swimming through the void. "My God," Dr. Green whispered. "There must be dozens of species here, maybe hundreds." Captain Hayes stared at the station. His face was calm, but his heart was beating fast. "This is it," Ambassador Moore said. She was standing behind him, her hands clasped together. "Everything we've worked for. Everything we've dreamed of. It all comes down to what happens next." The radio crackled. A voice came through, cold and official. "Earth vessel designated Horizon. You are cleared for docking at Bay 774. Proceed immediately. Do not deviate from the assigned course. The Council is waiting." Captain Hayes took a deep breath. He looked at his crew, at the faces of the people who had traveled so far, who had given up so much. "All right," he said. "Let's go show them what humans are made of." The Horizon moved forward, a tiny ship among giants, carrying the hopes of an entire world. Ahead of them, the station waited. Inside it, 47 species would sit in judgment. Humanity had arrived at the threshold of the stars. Now they just had to prove they deserved to walk through. The docking bay was cold and gray. Metal walls stretched up toward a ceiling so high it was lost in shadow. Strange machines hummed and clicked in the darkness. The air smelled like nothing Catherine Moore had ever experienced before. A mixture of chemicals and something organic, something alive. A floating drone met them at the airlock. It was a simple sphere of silver metal, with a single blue light that pulsed as it spoke. "Human delegation. Follow. Do not touch anything. Do not speak to anyone. Do not stray from the path. Violation of these rules will result in immediate expulsion from Council space." Captain Hayes nodded. "Understood. Lead the way." They walked for what felt like hours through corridors that twisted and turned in ways that did not make sense. Sometimes they passed windows that looked out into space. Sometimes they passed doors that opened onto rooms filled with creatures that defied description. Dr. Green wanted to stop and stare, to study and learn, but he forced himself to keep moving. There would be time for science later. If they survived, finally, they reached a massive door, made of something that looked like crystal, but felt warm to the touch. The drone floated aside, and the door slowly opened. The council chamber was beyond anything humans had ever imagined. It was circular, like an ancient arena, with tiered seating rising up on all sides. But the scale was impossible. The ceiling was so far above that artificial clouds drifted across it, and the walls seemed to stretch into infinity. 47 different sections held 47 different species, each one stranger than the last. Catherine saw beings of pure light, floating in containment fields. She saw creatures made of crystal that chimed softly as they moved. She saw things that looked like shadows given form, and things that looked like oceans compressed into walking shapes. Some had eyes, some had none. Some existed in ways that her mind could not fully understand, and all of them were looking at her. In the center of the chamber was a small platform. It was clearly designed for petitioners, for species who came to beg for acceptance. Catherine understood immediately that it was meant to make them feel small. She stepped onto it anyway. Above them all, in a floating structure that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, sat the High Arbiter. Its name was Zethal, and it was a being of shifting geometric shapes, triangles and circles and forms that had no names. When it spoke, the words did not come through the air. They appeared directly in Catherine's mind. Species designation, human. Origin, Sol 3. Locally designated Earth. Technological classification, Level 2.4. Spacefaring capability, Primitive. The council recognizes your petition for provisional membership. You may speak. Catherine took a deep breath. Behind her, Captain Hayes and the others waited silently. This was her moment. Everything depended on what she said next. Honored members of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. Humanity comes before you not as conquerors or as beggars, but as neighbors. We have looked at the stars since we first gained the ability to wonder, and we have always believed that we were not alone. Today, we ask only for the chance to prove ourselves worthy of standing among you. She paused, hoping for some reaction. A nod, a sign of approval. Anything. Instead, there was laughter. It started in one section of the chamber and spread like fire. Different sounds from different species, but all of them carried the same meaning. They were laughing at her. At humanity, at the foolish little creatures from the tiny blue planet who thought they deserved to stand among the stars. Worthy. The word came from a Vorthexy delegate, a serpentine being coiled around a hovering platform. Its scales were black as night, and its eyes burned with cold amusement. Your species has existed for barely 200,000 cycles. You have spent most of that time killing each other. You poisoned your own atmosphere for profit. You cannot even agree on basic governance among yourselves. And you speak to us of worthiness? More laughter, more voices joining in. They still burn dead matter for energy, someone said. Their communication networks are filled with lies they tell themselves, another added. They have weapons of mass destruction pointed at their own cities, their own people. Catherine felt her face grow hot. She wanted to argue, to defend humanity, but what could she say? Everything they were saying was true. A crystal being spoke, its voice like wind chimes in a storm. You ask to join the council, but you cannot even join each other. Your planet has hundreds of nations, each one competing with the others. You fight over land, over resources, over ideas, over the color of your skin. Tell us, human, how can you claim to be ready for the galaxy when you are not even ready for yourselves? The laughter grew louder. Catherine looked at Captain Hayes, but even his calm face showed cracks of anger and shame. High Arbiter Zethal raised a limb that might have been a hand, and silence fell instantly. The council will deliberate, it announced. The human delegation will wait in the antechamber. You will be summoned when a decision has been reached. That was it. No chance to respond, no opportunity to defend themselves. They were simply dismissed, like children sent to their rooms while the adults talked. The floating drone appeared beside them. Follow. Catherine stepped off the platform. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to walk with dignity. Behind her, she could still hear the whispers and chuckles of 47 species who had just watched humanity be humiliated. The antechamber was small and cold. There were no windows, no decorations, nothing but gray walls and hard benches. It was a waiting room for failures. Patricia Vance sat down heavily. That was a massacre. It wasn't a hearing, Dr. Green said bitterly. It was entertainment. They invited us here to laugh at us. Captain Hayes stood by the door, his arms crossed. He said nothing, but Catherine could see his jaw clenched tight. We're not finished yet, she said, though her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. They haven't made their decision, haven't they? Patricia shook her head. Ambassador, with all respect, you saw their faces. They made their decision the moment we walked in. Probably before we even left Earth, a small screen on the wall flickered to life. It showed the council chamber, where delegates were now casting votes. One by one, the rejections piled up. 41 species voted against humanity. 5 abstained. Only 1 voted in favor. The math was brutal. The decision was clear. Humanity had been rejected. Catherine slumped onto a bench. 30 years of diplomacy. A year of travel. The hopes of 8 billion people. All of it ending in this cold gray room, with the echoes of alien laughter still ringing in her ears. But when she looked at Captain Hayes, she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Not defeat. Not surrender. She saw fire. "Dan," she said quietly, "what are you thinking?" He turned to face her. "I'm thinking that they haven't heard everything yet. I'm thinking that they've seen our past, but they haven't seen our heart." He looked at the screen, at the final vote being tallied. "Request a point of order, Catherine. Tell them I want to speak. One last time. They've already decided." "I know." Hayes smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had nothing left to lose. "That's exactly why they need to hear what I have to say." The request took 3 hours to process. 3 hours of sitting in that cold gray room, watching the screen, waiting to see if anyone would even bother to listen. Catherine had argued against it at first. What was the point? The vote was finished. The rejection was complete. Going back into that chamber would only invite more humiliation, more laughter, more pain. But Daniel Hayes would not be moved. "They need to hear us," he said. "Really hear us. Not our request for membership, not our technology levels or our political systems. They need to hear who we actually are." "And who are we, Dan?" Patricia asked. Her voice was tired, defeated. "We're exactly what they said. Violent, divided, self-destructive. Everything they accused us of is true. We, contrary that rand, we have be, on 5, trive. We have disgrubtown of the dated. We have disgrubtown of the bive. That's not all we are." Dr. Green looked up from his tablet. He had been researching the council's records, trying to understand the species that had just condemned them. "Captain, I found something interesting. The one species that voted in our favor, the Aldrani. According to these records, they're one of the founding members of the council, ancient, highly respected, and their history is remarkable." "What do you mean?" "They were like us once." Green turned his tablet so the others could see. "Almost exactly like us. Warlike. Divided into competing nations. They nearly wiped themselves out with nuclear weapons about 50,000 years ago. But they survived. They unified. They evolved. And now, they're one of the most respected civilizations in the galaxy." Catherine leaned forward. "So there's a precedent. A species that was violent and divided managed to become something better." Quote, "Not just one," Green said. "I've found at least 7 examples in the Council's records. Species that were once considered too primitive, too dangerous, too broken, and now they sit in judgment of others." Hayes nodded slowly. "That's what I need them to remember. That's what I need them to see." The door opened. The silver drone floated in, its blue light pulsing. "The Council has agreed to hear one final statement from the human delegation. One representative may speak. Time will be limited. This is highly irregular and will not change the official decision. Do you accept these terms?" "I accept," Hayes said without hesitation. "Follow." The walk back to the chamber felt longer than before. Hayes moved with purpose, his footsteps echoing in the silent corridors. Behind him, the rest of the delegation followed, but they would not enter the chamber. This was his moment. His responsibility. At the great crystal door, Hayes paused. He looked back at Catherine, at Patricia, at Dr. Green, and the others who had traveled so far. "Whatever happens in there," he said, "I want you to know that I'm proud to have served with you. I'm proud to represent our species, and no matter what they decide, we did not come here in vain." Catherine nodded. There were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. "Give them hell, Dan." He turned and walked through the door. The chamber was different now, quieter. The laughter had stopped, replaced by a curious silence. 47 species watched as a single human walked to the central platform and stood where his ambassador had stood before. High Arbiter Zethal's geometric form shifted and pulsed. "Captain Daniel Hayes of Earth. The Council has already rendered its decision. Your petition is denied. What more do you wish to say?" Hayes looked up at the assembled aliens. Beings of light and shadow, creatures of crystal and water, minds that had existed for millions of years, civilizations that had mastered technologies humanity could barely imagine. They were vast and ancient and powerful beyond measure. And he was just one man. But he was a human. And humans did not stay silent when they had something to say. "You're right about us," Hayes began. His voice was calm and clear, carrying across the enormous chamber without any need for amplification. "Everything you said is true. We fought wars over land and resources and ideas. We poisoned our planet for short-term profit. We built weapons that could destroy ourselves 1,000 times over. We are flawed. We are divided. And by your standards, yes, we are primitive." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. This was not what they had expected. Most petitioning species argued and defended and made excuses. This human was agreeing with them. "But here's what you don't understand about humanity," Hayes continued. "We know all of this about ourselves. We've always known. And we came anyway." He pointed toward a distant viewport, where stars glittered like diamonds scattered on black velvet. "You've been watching us for 200 years. You saw our wars. You saw our failures. You saw the worst of what we are. But I wonder, did you see the rest?" Hayes began to walk slowly around the platform, looking up at the different species as he spoke. "Did you see the doctor who worked 20 hours a day during our pandemics, knowing that she might be the next to die, but refusing to stop? Did you see the firefighter who ran into a burning building, again and again, to save people he had never met? Did you see the teacher who stayed late every night because she believed that every child, no matter how poor, no matter how broken, deserved a chance to learn?" The chamber was completely silent now. Even the beings of light had stopped their constant shifting. "Did you see the soldier who threw himself on a grenade to save his friends? Did you see the mother who worked 3 jobs so her children could eat? Did you see the strangers who pulled survivors from earthquakes, from floods, from disasters, asking nothing in return?" Hayes stopped walking. He stood in the center of the platform, looking directly at the High Arbiter. "You judge us by our worst moments. But we are not defined by our falls. We are defined by how many times we get back up. Every atrocity in our history was met by ordinary people who said no more. Every step backward was followed by 2 steps forward. We crawled out of caves. We survived ice ages. We endured plagues that killed half our population. And through it all, we kept going. We kept reaching. We kept dreaming of the stars." He spread his arms wide, taking in the entire chamber. "You ask if we're ready for galactic society. Maybe we're not. But we didn't come here to prove we're perfect. We came here to prove we're trying. And we will keep trying. Whether you accept us or not, that's what humans do. We don't give up. We don't stop. We don't quit." Hayes lowered his arms. His voice dropped, becoming quieter but somehow even more powerful. "You can reject our petition. You can send us home. You can forget we ever existed. But in 1,000 years, or 10,000, or 100,000, we will still be here. We will still be reaching for the stars. And someday, whether you like it or not, you will have to stand beside us. Because the universe is vast and cold and dangerous. And the only species that survive are the ones who refuse to give up." He nodded once, a formal gesture of respect. "That is all I have to say. Thank you for your time." The silence that followed was the deepest Hayes had ever experienced. No whispers. No laughter. No movement. 47 species sat frozen, staring at the single human who had just spoken truth into the heart of their power. And then, slowly, something remarkable happened. The Aldrani delegate rose from its seat. It was ancient, its form weathered by countless millennia, but its movements were deliberate and full of meaning. It turned toward the platform and inclined its head, a gesture of respect. More delegates followed. The Valarii, beings of living crystal. The collective of Theta 9, who spoke with one voice and moved with one mind. The ambassadors of the deep current. Creatures from a world of endless ocean. One by one, they rose. They acknowledged, they honored. Not all of them, not even most, but enough. Enough to show that Hayes had done something no human had ever done before. He had made the galaxy listen. The silence stretched on. Captain Hayes stood on the platform, watching the delegates, who had risen in respect, slowly return to their seats. His heart was pounding, but his face remained calm. He had said everything he could say. Now the universe would decide what it meant. High Arbiter Zethal's geometric form pulsed and shifted, colors rippling across its impossible surface. When it finally spoke, there was something different in its tone, something that had not been there before. Captain Daniel Hayes of Earth, your words have been heard. The Council will now confer. Hayes nodded and stepped back. He had expected to be escorted out, sent back to the cold gray waiting room. Instead, the drone that had guided him earlier floated to his side and simply waited. He was being allowed to stay, to witness. The Council began to speak among themselves. It was chaos at first, dozens of alien languages overlapping, thoughts and sounds and vibrations filling the enormous chamber. Hayes could not understand the words, but he could read the energy. Some delegates were angry, others were thoughtful, a few seemed almost excited. The Vorthexy delegate, the serpentine creature that had mocked humanity so viciously, was speaking rapidly, its coils tightening with agitation. Hayes did not need a translator to know it was arguing against him, but the Aldrani delegate was speaking too, and when it spoke, others listened. The humans are young, the Aldrani said. Its voice was ancient, carrying the weight of 50,000 years. They are violent and divided, just as we once were. They have made terrible mistakes, just as we did, but I have lived long enough to recognize something in this species, something that cannot be measured by technology or politics. The Vorthexy hissed. What could you possibly recognize in such primitive creatures? Fire, the Aldrani said simply. The same fire that burned in us when we were young. The same fire that nearly destroyed us, but ultimately saved us. The fire that makes a species look at the stars and say, I will go there, even if it kills me. Another delegate spoke up, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell. We have seen many species with fire. Most of them burn out long before they reach the stars. Yes, the Aldrani agreed. But some do not. And those that survive their own fire become something remarkable, something the galaxy needs. It turned toward Hayes, and though it had no eyes in any human sense, Hayes felt its gaze. I believe these humans may be such a species. The debate continued. Arguments flew back and forth, some in favor of humanity, many against. Hayes stood and listened, understanding almost nothing but feeling everything. His fate, and the fate of his entire species, was being decided by beings he could barely comprehend. Finally, High Arbiter Zethal raised its limb, and silence fell once more. The Council has heard sufficient argument. A new vote will be taken. The question is this: shall humanity be granted any consideration beyond outright rejection? Hayes held his breath. The votes came in one by one. The screens around the chamber lit up with symbols Hayes could not read, but the colors were clear enough. Red for rejection, green for consideration, yellow for abstention. At first, the reds dominated. The Vorthexy, the collective mind of Sigma-7, the beings of shadow, who had watched in silence throughout the entire proceedings. They wanted humanity gone, and they made no secret of it. But then the greens began to appear. The Aldrani, of course, the Velari, the Deep Current ambassadors, and others, species that had not risen earlier but had been moved by Hayes's words. One by one, they cast their votes in favor of giving humanity a chance. When the final vote was tallied, the result appeared in a language all beings could understand. Simple numbers: 23 for rejection, 18 for consideration, 6 abstentions. Hayes felt his heart sink. Rejection still held the majority. Humanity had failed. But then High Arbiter Zethal spoke again. The vote is conclusive. Full membership is denied. Hayes nodded, accepting the judgment. He had done his best. It was not enough. However, Zethal continued, a significant number of council members have expressed interest in the human species. This is unusual for a level 2.4 civilization. It is unprecedented in Council history for such a primitive species to receive 18 favorable votes. The High Arbiter's form shifted, taking on new configurations that Hayes could not interpret. The Council, therefore, offers a compromise. Humanity will not be granted membership, but humanity will be granted provisional observer status. Your delegation may return. Your ships may travel within designated corridors. Your scientists may access certain non-restricted archives, and in 100 of your Earth years, you may petition for membership again. Hayes blinked. He was not sure he had understood correctly. Observer status? You will not have voting rights. You will not have full access to Council resources. You will be watched, monitored, and evaluated. Any violation of Council law will result in immediate revocation of all privileges. Zethal paused. But you will be here, among us, learning, growing, proving whether your captain's words were truth or merely impressive rhetoric. 100 years. It was not victory. It was not even close to what they had hoped for. But it was something. It was a door left open. A chance. We accept, Hayes said without hesitation. With gratitude and with humility. We accept. Then it is done. Zethal's form pulsed with finality. The human delegation will be provided with documentation of your new status. You may depart. When ready. The council session is concluded. The great chamber began to empty. Delegates rose from their seats and floated or walked or shifted toward exits that appeared in the walls. Some of them glanced at Hayes as they passed. Most of those glances were still dismissive, still mocking, but a few were different. A few held something that might have been curiosity, or respect, or even hope. The Aldrani delegate approached Hayes directly. Up close, it was even more impressive. A being of ancient grace and quiet power. It stopped before him, and inclined its head once more. You spoke well, human, better than you know. Thank you, Hayes said, for voting for us, for believing in us. I do not believe in you yet, the Aldrani corrected gently. Belief must be earned over time. What I believe is that you deserve the chance to prove yourselves. That is all any young species can ask for. It began to turn away, then paused. 100 years seems like a long time to your kind. It is barely a moment to us. Use it wisely. Learn from your mistakes. Grow beyond what you are today. And when you return to petition again, do not send ambassadors with speeches. Send ambassadors with proof. Proof of what? The Aldrani's ancient form seemed to shimmer with something that might have been a smile. Proof that the fire in your species burns to create, not to destroy. Proof that you can be trusted with the power the Council offers. Proof that humanity is worthy of the stars. It turned and glided away, leaving Hayes alone on the platform. Alone, but not defeated. Not anymore. The drone floated to his side. Human Captain Hayes. Your delegation awaits. The horizon is cleared for departure. Hayes took one last look at the great chamber, at the seats where 47 species had sat in judgment, at the platform where he had stood and spoken for all of humanity. Then he smiled. Let's go home, he said. We have a lot of work to do. The journey home took 11 months, just like the journey out. But everything felt different now. The ship was the same, the stars were the same, the crew was the same, yet somehow, the universe itself seemed to have changed. Captain Daniel Hayes spent most of those months in the observation deck, watching the stars slide past. He had always loved space, ever since he was a boy looking up at the night sky from his backyard in Ohio. But now, he looked at those distant lights with new eyes. He knew that around some of those stars, civilizations existed, beings of unimaginable power and ancient wisdom, and they were watching humanity, waiting to see what would happen next. Ambassador Catherine Moore found him there one evening, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She had developed the habit during their journey out, and it had continued on the way back. You're thinking too much again, she said, handing him a cup. Probably. Hayes took a sip. The coffee was terrible, made from synthetic compounds that only vaguely resembled the real thing. But it was warm, and that was enough. I keep replaying it in my head, wondering if I said the right things, wondering if I said enough. You said exactly what they needed to hear. Catherine sat down beside him. I've been a diplomat for 30 years, Dan. I've seen every kind of speech, every kind of negotiation. What you did in that chamber was something I've never seen before. You told them the truth about who we are, without excuses and without apologies. And then you told them why that truth matters. It wasn't enough to get us membership. No. But it was enough to change minds. It was enough to earn respect from species that have never respected anyone. It was enough to give us a chance. She smiled. That's more than most people accomplish in a lifetime. Hayes nodded slowly. She was right. He knew she was right. But part of him still wished he could have done more. The door opened, and Patricia Vance walked in. She had been different since they left the council station. Quieter, more thoughtful. The anger and bitterness that had filled her after the initial rejection seemed to have transformed into something else. Something like determination. You two should see this, she said. The quantum relay just received a data burst from Earth. They followed her to the communications room, where Dr. Green was already waiting. His face was alight with excitement. The same enthusiasm he had shown when they first saw the council station. It's incredible, he said. The news of what happened at the council arrived 3 months ago via the relay. Earth has been going crazy ever since. He pulled up a display, and suddenly the room was filled with images from home. News broadcasts, public speeches, crowds gathering in cities across the world, signs and banners with slogans that made Hayes' throat tighten. 100 years. One chance. We will be ready. They're not just talking about it, Patricia said. They're doing it. Look at this. She scrolled through report after report. The United Nations had created a new agency specifically dedicated to preparing humanity for council membership. Every nation on Earth had pledged resources. Old conflicts that had seemed impossible to resolve were suddenly being negotiated. Compromises reached. Peace treaties signed. Universities were creating new programs in xenolinguistics and alien cultures. Scientists were working together across borders like never before. Children were being taught from an early age that they were not just citizens of their countries, but citizens of Earth, citizens of a species that was preparing to take its place among the stars. It's like your speech woke something up, Dr. Green said. Like humanity finally understood what's at stake. What we could become if we stopped fighting each other and started working together. Hayes stared at the images flowing across the screen. He saw faces from every nation, every culture, every background, black and white and brown, young and old, rich and poor, all of them united by a common purpose. We have 100 years, he said quietly. That's about 4 generations. 4 generations to prove that we can be better than we've been. Is it enough time? Catherine asked. Hayes thought about everything he had seen. The wars and the hatred and the destruction. But also the courage and the kindness and the love. The firefighters running into burning buildings. The doctors working through pandemics. The teachers staying late. The ordinary people doing extraordinary things every single day. It will have to be, he said. And you know what? I think it will be. Because that's who we are. When we have a goal, when we have something to reach for, we don't stop, we don't quit, we just keep climbing. The horizon continued its journey through the void, carrying its small crew of dreamers and believers. Behind them lay the council station and the judgment of the galaxy. Ahead lay Earth and the judgment of history. 6 months later, the ship emerged from its final fold above the blue marble that humans called home. The sight of it, so small and fragile against the infinite darkness, brought tears to more than one pair of eyes. They landed to a hero's welcome. Millions of people lined the streets. Leaders from every nation waited to shake their hands. But Hayes barely noticed any of it. He was thinking about the future, about the work that needed to be done. In the weeks that followed, he was asked to give hundreds of speeches. He declined most of them. But there was one he could not refuse. One given at the United Nations to an audience of billions watching across the globe. He stood at the podium. looking out at the faces of humanity. Representatives from every country, every people, every tradition. All watching, all waiting. 100 years ago, he began. We were cave dwellers. We huddled around fires, afraid of the dark, afraid of each other. But we looked up at the stars, and we wondered, we dreamed, and somehow, against all odds, we survived long enough to reach them. He paused, letting the words settle. The galaxy thinks we are too young, too violent, too divided. And maybe they're right. But they gave us a chance. 100 years to prove that we can be more than we have been. 100 years to show that the fire that burns in humanity is not the fire of destruction, but the fire of creation. Hayes looked directly into the cameras, speaking now to every human being on the planet. This is our moment. Not just for those of us standing here today. We have the sensterder. And across captive the moking. Complete and he dod our. And he rexity and a captive the batter. But for our children and our grandchildren and their children after them. The work we do now, the choices we make now, will determine whether humanity rises to meet its destiny or falls back into the darkness. He straightened, his voice growing stronger. I believe in us. I believe that we can be better. I believe that when we stop fighting each other and start reaching together, there is nothing in this universe that can stop us, because that's what humans do. We fall down, we make mistakes, but we always get back up. Hayes raised his hand toward the sky, toward the stars that waited beyond. 100 years, one chance, and one species that has never learned to give up. The galaxy is watching. Let's show them what humanity can become. The cheers that followed shook the building. But Hayes was already thinking ahead, already planning, already dreaming. Somewhere out there, among the countless stars, the Aldrani were watching. The Council was watching. The entire galaxy was watching, and humanity was just getting started.